Welcome back, everyone. So we are nearing the end of our plenary sessions. Again, due to the rich discussions on site, we might not be able to accommodate all the questions, especially those posted online. So we will prepare a Q&A document for each session that we will be posting on the website. Some of you are already asking about proceedings because we are going paperless. The forum website will be our digital proceedings. We will also add the digital proceedings in the ADB Knowledge Events site. If you have not visited it yet, it is at events.development.asia. So this is the site where materials from almost all ADB events are uploaded, including the materials from the previous Food Security Forum. So before we close, let us summarize what we have discussed so far. What are the major takeaways from the two-day plenary sessions? And what are the follow-up actions needed? At this point, let us welcome my boss, Ching-Feng Zhang, Senior Director of the Agriculture, Food, Nature, and Rural Development Sector Office, who will moderate the summary and highlight session. Ching-Feng, over to you, please.
Thank you so much. Now we need to regathering and also start our second last session. This session focus on takeaway, reflection, and of course is the way forward. Again, last 1.5 day, we heard the key message. Food security remains very, very serious in Asia Pacific. This region has the highest number of the people facing the acute food insecurity worldwide. Rice prices are shown by more than 40% last year. Rising rice prices also compromising purchase power of the people in this region. At the same time, while the ADB DMCs facing one or more issue of the malnutrition. Impact of the climate change, floods, droughts, disease, and also while the other climate impacts right now intensify the risk of the food production, food insecurity, floods in Pakistan, heat wave in India, droughts in Central Asia, Yangtze River in the last 2 years reinforces this reality. Disruptions to livelihoods exacerbate the food scarcity compounded by the climate-induced migration as well. In this region, ecosystem degradation also continue putting enormous pressure on the fragile food systems. Many of the ecosystems in the region, from the tropical forest to coral reef, have been degraded beyond their repair. Biodiversity loss undermines the ability of the ecosystem to adapt to the climate change, leading to the exacerbation in climate change and also the increase in the threats to food security. But at the same time, as a vicious cycle, the recent evolution of food system also continue to inflame the gravest challenge in our facing with our humanity, notably loss of biodiversity, environmental degradation, and also the climate change. The environmental costs of our existing food system right now is around $3 trillion every year. But at the same time, we also know that if we transform our food system, If we shift to take into account of the health dates and also the biodiversity, will result in between the 5 trillion and 10 trillion US dollars in benefits. This is discovered by the recent Food System Economics Commission's report. Good news is December last year, 159 countries signed the Declaration on Sustainable Agricultural Resilient Food System CAM actions. One of the parties agree and also emphasize the profound importance of the nexus among the climate change, natural capital loss, and also the global security. Last few days, we already discussed about the challenges and of course also the solutions. In the next few days, we still have the chance to continue to have the deep dive. But before we move to the breakout session and also deep dive, we gather this particular session, reflect what we heard, and also how we take it forward. We have the distinguished panel. I'm going to call one by one, come to the stage. The first is Joe, Associate Vice President from IFA. Let's welcome the Joe to come to the stage. And then we have Andrew, Global Director for Innovative Finance and Resource and Mobilization for sg-afnr. Welcome. And then we have Dr. Cheney, Senior Director, Transformation Strategy from IFPRI. And we also have Paul Winters, Professor Paul Winters, Executive Director, Innovation Commission for Climate Change from Chicago University. And then we have Professor Kijiro from the Kyoto University. And lastly, we have Ms. Estoria, Secretary General from the Asia Farmers Association for Sustainable Rural Development. So again, this session is coming in the middle of our food security forum. Again, this session we want to hear our panelists' reflection, takeaway, guidance for the way forward. Not only just for the next few days deep dive, but also for the next 5 years, how we can work together to transform the food system in the Asia Pacific. Each of our panelists have 5 minutes. So after that, we still have the chance to have the second round discussions. Probably let me start with Joe from the IFA. You have the 5 minutes to share your takeaway.
Thank you so much. So yeah, first I do want to thank the organizers. It's been a fantastic day and a half, very rich discussions, and I don't think I'm going to be doing justice to all of it. But I'm going to try and see whether I can collapse at least my learning and my highlights into three things that I'm going to categorize under the 3 Bs. So the first B is building, the second B is blending, and the third one is benefits. So building, blending, and benefits. And the reason I'm doing that is because the richness of the discussion. So let's talk about building first. I think what came out quite strongly in a lot of the discussions is that we've got to build quite a few of the systems that we are encountering. So whether that's partnerships or morning discussion, whether that is measurement, whether that is building bankable projects, all of that is really thinking about, given the crisis, the conflicts that we are witnessing today, the world today is very different from the world that we've seen over the past 30 years, et cetera. And while with ODA, we are seeing, for example, in agriculture at least, or in food systems, ODA has gone up approximately 10% from 2018. What we are witnessing is that the structure of that ODA is still neglectful of nutrition. And so in building the systems, the partnerships, the engagements that we are doing today, we've got to start, and the bankable projects that we are doing today, or any of the initiatives that we are taking on today, while we are looking at agri-food systems, while we are looking at building partnerships, it's really important to keep the focus on where we want to get to, which is clearly nutrition and health. So even as we build those agri-food systems and look at agricultural development and value chains, we've got to look at nutrition and health. But we've got to also ensure that this is sustainable. So there is a long-term aspect to that. Within that, I'm going to slip in a very important focus that was also brought out by the keynote speaker, so Professor Gulati yesterday, which is the focus on smallholders. And I think that recognizing that smallholders are contributing to 1/3 of the overall food that we are eating, and knowing that smallholders are also far more likely to be incorporating biodiverse methods, agroecology, agroforestry, and are, of course, the most vulnerable, it's clear that we've got to build the systems for them. So that's my first B. The second is blending. So like I said yesterday as well, I think, and there was a very rich discussion on private sector in the afternoon yesterday. I think the key thing is recognizing that, yeah, we've got to blend the private and the public, and the ADB and IFAD are all public institutions. But one of the challenges that I think we've got to recognize is that while we keep saying that, yes, the private sector is stepping in or will step in, clearly the private sector hasn't stepped in the big paradigm shifting way that we would have expected it to over the past 30 years. So clearly something has to change. Something has to change so that we can help scale up the engagement with the private sector, so that commercial interests, so that the impact investors are not just niche players within the space that we are all looking at, where we are clearly looking at global goods. So how do you change those incentives? First, price better. And again, I think a lot of the discussions that are going on are very much about how can we price the externalities. So the value of the food today is 12 trillion, but the price is 8 trillion, so there's a $4 trillion gap. We've got to start to change that and to nudge the system in a way that is truly positive. And the key thing is really creating those incentives. And I really think that public finance institutions like ours, like ADB, like IFAD, like all of the ones represented here, have to really move in innovative ways so that we can start to price it and provide the incentives. So that's the blending, and I think we haven't done a good enough job till now because, and a key indicator for me is how long it takes for us to create blended platforms and to ensure that, yes, we are truly providing the de-risking services that we are talking about, the enabling environment, and really getting the private commercial players to come in a very big way. So while we all spoke about platforms, I think it's really important to think about that. And then the last one is benefit sharing. let's not forget that we are all working for the smallholder or the farmer on the ground or the human being on the ground that is suffering both from, huge greenhouse gas emissions, but also the fact that, yeah, our soils are getting depleted very quickly, and we are suffering from either undernourishment or malnourishment. So benefit sharing, given that, and especially for smallholder farmers, we know that they are the ones that are most likely to invest in systems and production patterns that are sustainable for the planet, ensuring that they also get the benefits from this investment is really key. And also ensuring that we are looking at agri-food systems not just as a challenge. Yes, it is the source of 1/3 of the overall emissions that we are seeing in the atmosphere. But the opportunity with agri-food systems is that if we were able to invest in plant proteins, in greater efficiency, in infrastructure development, in value chain development, reduce the amount of beef and increase the efficiency of dairy production as well as rice production, we could reduce the amount of emissions and actually make agri-food systems a net sink. The benefits of that need to be monetized, and we need to be able to provide that incentive to the overall enabling environment. And unless we are able to do that, we won't be doing the paradigm shift that this sector deserves. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Joe. Yeah, thank you so much. It is very inspiring, the 3B. I believe my colleague who organizes deep dive will incorporate, and also going to also strengthen the 3B in the next deep dive sessions, particularly for the last B, beneficiary entity, small farmers. I know that, of course, is Madam Estrella Panina is here. She's leading the Asia Farmers Association for the Sustainable Rural Development. Probably we turn to you, build up on this 3B, particularly for the beneficiary entity. You have the 5 minutes, also share your guidance. Thank you, Madam.
Okay, thank you, Sir Chairperson, and good morning to everyone, and for brothers and sisters who are celebrating Eid Mubarak today. Okay, so I would like to share my takeaways in this two-day forum by responding to the 5 W's and 1 H that journalists usually do, no? So first, when? Because our forum is investing for the future of climate, food, and nutrition. So when do we invest? So our key takeaway is hearing also from the panelists, especially yesterday, the time to invest is now. Because we are in a state of climate emergency, and this climate emergency exacerbates conflicts, food insecurity, decreased incomes leading to hunger and poverty, and the Asia-Pacific region is half of the most food insecure people are in our region. And we just have 6 years to go before the SDGs in 2030. So we need to act now. Okay? Why? Why do we invest for this kind of future? Now, because our key takeaway, also based on the discussions and our consultations, this is our only planet. And so we have to save it. Before, we have to save it for our grandchildren, for our children, but now we also have to save it for ourselves because we are experiencing already the effects of climate change. Last night, I was watching the BBC, and the news was a region in Russia was experiencing flooding 9 meters up. And it was not because of what we know causes floods, the massive rains, but it was snow melting in the mountains. So that's really a very bad sign that we are in global warming. So, and the people are protesting because they said that their local government has not done enough to prepare them. Okay, so what and where? I think these are same questions. So where are the investments to be made? and what investment should be done. So Paul Winters yesterday said, many innovations are not really new. Okay? And for us, we think it's a bit right, because we remember in 2005, so that was more than 10 years ago, AFA, we are a regional farmers consultation, a regional farmers organization, and we had consultations in 2005, and we already said, we have to mainstream sustainable agriculture. Okay? Our members are practicing integrated, diversified, organic farming systems, but these are always sidelined. These are neglected in the many investments in agriculture during that time. But we already saw increase in incomes, increase in soil health, increase in biodiversity in the farms where we were experimenting this. So in terms of what and where, I think we just need to scale up and scale out this kind of practices that are already there. No? Through various extension work, and then, but we know that there are some innovations that have to be done, like in digital agriculture, in climate tolerant crops. So we want to have co-innovation and co-creation, research and innovation. Now we go to the who. The who. So we have all these stakeholders, but every panelist, I think many of the panelists mentioned small-scale farmers, but we want to highlight the centrality of small-scale farmers, women, men, and young. So centrality because not only they are producers, but they are the biggest private sector. An IUCN report said that we, small-scale farmers, are the biggest private sector. We have increased income, we buy your TV, we buy your cell phone, we buy your equipments on our own. Okay, so we feel that we will need to, and then in the how will be, how if we are recognized, if we can be recognized as equal partners in the work for mainstreaming climate, food security, and nutrition. Can we be recognized as equal partners and giving us seats, for example, in the advisory and governance bodies of many international financing institutions? We are happy with IFAD, for example, that we, the farmers' organization, sit in the advisory committee of the ASAP Plus. No? And in GAFSP, we three regional farmers organizations sit in the steering committee. And these were very powerful because, for example, in GAFSP, we were able to make GAFSP invest in proposals that are where the people's organizations or the producers' organizations are the proponents of these proposals. And also, in terms of the how, maybe if we have lots of investments on this climate, food, nature nexus, but we want to see also direct and adequate financing to farmers' organizations. So mainly, for example, yesterday there were many statistics that say how much is accessed by small farmers, and all these statistics say that we receive very insignificant amount. And if we are to be considered as partners in the work for climate resiliency, we think we will need some amount so that we could build our capacities and exercise our role in terms of providing economic services to our members, and as well as in engaging our governments for policy advocacy work, so that the enabling policy environment that we need will be there. No, we will be the ones who could be at the front runner for this advocacy work that has to be done at the local, national level. So thank you very much. These are my key takeaways.
Thanks so much. Again, I John from the IFA talking about 3B, and it's Stuart from our Asia Farmer Organization talking about 5W and plus 1H. I know probably we can turn to Paul. you and Michael Kramer talking about saving innovations. Of course, this is publicized in the COP28. Now, the term in the Asia-Pacific context, where you also translated to 5G, or is a sort of the new takeaway? 5 minutes.
Thanks.
Oh.
I'm not as clever as my colleagues here to come up with letters. I have 3 points, but no letters to go with them. So the first point is, one takeaway is, the urgency of transforming systems and scaling up funding for those systems is clearly a big takeaway. And that might not seem like a big deal, but I was thinking back to when I was at EFAD in Joe's role right before COVID, so in 2019. And to have this kind of meeting just wouldn't have happened. And the narrative that you have here around food systems just wouldn't have happened. There have just been reports that have come out from the IPCC, the World Resources Institutes, FOLU, a series of reports on climate change in agriculture that basically saying climate change is a big source of greenhouse gas emissions, and it's going to be one of the most affected by climate change. So you had this big problems. But people weren't talking at this level. We were talking at building resilience of farmers for a long time, but we weren't talking at food system transformation. And the fact that since then, we've had the Food System Summit, a declaration at COP28, and now we have this meeting of the IFIs that occurred at Stanford. You have these different, I'm talking with the Inter-American Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, others about food system transformation. I'm just very surprised that all this happened. So my one takeaway is we've actually made a lot of progress. I was at the governing council, the board of governors of the Inter-American Development Bank about a month ago, and they have 6 themes that they talk about. And one of them, which I was on the panel on, was on agriculture and climate change. They hadn't had a panel on agriculture in 15 years, and it's back on the agenda now. And we see here this big forum, Asian Development Bank. We saw earlier from Zheng Fan all of the financing that's now going into it, and it's impressive. So takeaway number 1 is we're actually making some progress. Takeaway number 2 is we still have a lot to do. In terms of a lot to do, I really think, and Esther talked about this, and Ishmahani said this yesterday too, from the CJR, we do need to think differently, and we need to think of scaling. And agricultural research is critical, and we saw Mark's presentation yesterday about the foresight analysis and the importance of ag research, the returns of ag research. And we need all that, but we really need to make sure things go to scale. There's too many projects that reach 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 farmers and don't reach the 10 million, 20 million, 30 million farmers. And we really need to try to do that. Innovations are different now than they were in the past, so we can't just passively hope that things will be taken to scale. Sustainable agriculture, which, as Esther noted, a lot of farmers have done for a long time, won't automatically go to scale, and the benefits of managing farming in a way that helps the planet won't be done unless we change incentive, change his policy, repurpose subsidies, et cetera. So we need to do a lot of things differently and reach that. And as I said yesterday, there are innovations that exist. There's ideas out there, and we really need to figure out how to scale those up. I think part of that, and I'm hoping through these forums, is that the multilateral development banks do have to think differently how they do things. The standard model that we have, a place like EFAD, ADB, Inter-American Development Bank, is loans to governments. Those aren't always the most conducive way to take things to scale. You really have to consciously make an effort to do that, and we're hoping to work with Asian Development Bank to do that type of thing. But it is something that we have to think, and are there other funding mechanisms that can help scale? So the second point is we really need to think differently and to think about scale all the time. How are we going to get it? And some of these technologies, in Latin America, there's microbial fertilizers that are being used in Brazil that reduce the amount of fertilizer needs, so at the same time increasing yields. So they benefit the planet in that 40% less fertilizer means 40% less synthetic fertilizer, so you get less greenhouse gas emissions that way. They benefit the farmers, and I would guess in 20, 30 years they'll get to scale, but we don't have 20, 30 years to wait. And so part of it is the speed at which things happen and facilitating that. So the second is that. And the third thing, and I think this is part of Esther's point, is we do have to think carefully about how this is done. Both Esther and Joe have talked about, the importance of small-scale producers. Again, the microbial fertilizer example in Brazil, what we were told by an impact investor in Brazil is they're doing a great job of getting this to medium-scale farmers, that the medium-scale farmers already see the value and they're paying for it. The problem is the small-scale farmers aren't getting access, and they don't have the ability to get access. And so how do you make sure you expand that access? The same is true with digital agriculture. Yes, there's a lot of companies that are providing digital agriculture, digital extension services, but how do you get that to the small scale producers, and how do you make sure that the benefits are broad? Esther asked Celeste a question yesterday about female farmers in particular. How do you make sure that they're incorporated, the constraints that they have? So the manner in which you scale, the manner in which we increase all this funding, it matters, and who is part of that. And I think we need to explore opportunities, not just working with governments, but working directly with farmers' cooperatives, farmers' organizations, and direct funding. Because there's a study at EFAD that I think it was 2 to 3% of all finance for climate finance actually gets to small-scale producers. And that's just not acceptable when they're the most affected by it. And so we need to figure out how can we do that? And some of that might be thinking outside of the normal lines and thinking, can we directly get funding to scale innovations, to scale ideas to those small-scale producers? So those are my 3 points, but no letters going along with them. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Again, particularly your last comment about the engage small farmers in different way and also scale up is so important. I know the professor Kijiro from the Kobe University, you have a very good insight, balance the smallholder farmers and also how to consolidate the farmers is quite inspiring. Probably you have the 5 minutes, Professor.
All right, thank you very much. I'm Kei Otsuka. So we started with the leader forum yesterday, and leaders identified very important issues very nicely, like malnutrition, poverty, sustainability, resilience, and so on. And that was followed by, so they said that they identified important issues, but they did not tell us how to solve those problems, how to approach to those issues. And then there were very rich discussions by Mark Rosgrant, Ashok Gulati, Michael Kremer, Yvonne Pinto. Also, I liked Bruce Tolentino's discussion. So my proposal is to move leader forum to the end of the conference, so that organizers summarize what have been discussed and ask them what they would like to do, responding to the proposals made by researchers, practitioners, and ADB staff, and so on. That's the first one. When we write a paper, when we write a report, when we write a book, we have a main title, right? Sometimes we have subtitle. We seldom have 2 subtitles, but this one has Asia and Pacific, food security, and the climate. So which ones are main title and which ones are subtitled? And at least there must be 2 subtitles. And we had a very rich discussion about food security. I'm very pleased to learn a lot of things from international organizations and so on. And climate issues, that's of course absolutely important issue. But oh, sorry, Schengen Fan, you are here. You're one of the leaders and staying. I'm sorry to miss you. But there's been almost no discussion about Asia. I've been working on Asian agriculture for the last 45 years. What is a major issue in Asian agriculture? That is small-scale farming. Farm size is too small. And then non-farm sector is developing. So wage rate has been rising, labor cost is rising, so total production cost rises, so that country either has to import or protect the import. In Japan, grain self-sufficiency ratio is, I think, less than 30%. South Korea, less than 30%. Philippines has been increasing import of rice. Indonesia has a problem of high production cost of rice. So they restrict import. That is going to continue unless we expand farm size, facilitate mechanization, and facilitate labor-saving technology. I think Erie should focus on these labor-saving issues as well. That is going to be a major issue in Asia. And another critical issue which was not discussed for the last 2 days is contract farming, agro-processing. The fresh product, high-value products cannot go directly to a supermarket in urban areas. They must be processed, including pack housing. Pack house plays very important role. It washes, it dries, it sanitizes, and sort out the good ones and bad ones, and then package it, and then sell to the urban market or European market or American market. So this agro-processing plays very important role for agri-food system transformation. At the same time, it is a main source of rural industrialization, which creates employment opportunities for the farmers. And Bruce Tolentino said it may be a good idea to provide credit to rice millers. That's fine. But similarly, for production of tomatoes, production of orange, it's a good idea to support agro-processors. And that has been missing. I hope we'll have some discussions about these missing key issues in coming 2 days. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely small farmers. Yeah. Yeah, as my offline discussion with the professor, next few days, deep dive, small farmers, agribusiness, value chain approach, going to be discussed. Of course, this is a action need to be taken. That's more important. Again, Paul just mentioned about cooperation between the FI and also the research. One of the key breakthrough is this last 2 days. Yesterday was ADB and the CGII. We signed the MOU. Actually, in the past, we have a good cooperation with a number of the CGI centers already, IFPRI, EV, and many others. This is probably the first time we have this one more framework approach. The IDB and the CG have the framework approach to work together. So again, Andrew, since you are work with the CG so long time, and probably you can quickly share with the audiences about the role of the CG in the COP28 implementation, how the FI can help operationalize CGI's innovations. Over to you. You have 5 minutes. Andrew.
Thank you very much. So first, I just want to start by acknowledging the leadership of the ADB to bring this group together. A really amazing 2 days, and also the energy, Shengfeng, that you've brought to this this session, and of course this convening. My reflections on the last 2 days are going to sort of be pulled from this room, but also pulled from a number of conversations that I've had outside during the lunches, during the breaks, during the dinner, karaoke, our signing of our agreement. So, I think what I'm trying to do is just sort of like bring together the richness of the discussion and distill it into a number of key points. I think the first part to focus on for me was just the framing of the leadership session. Though there were elements that were called out by Professor here that were important, I think having the government representatives, finance institutions, humanitarian response, development organizations, research and innovation, all sitting together at the same leadership panel really set the tone for the rest of this session. So I think we saw President Massa call on the need for urgent and radical action on food systems transformation. Dr. Xu spoke about the underinvestment in climate finance. That's echoed throughout a number of conversations, a number of statements, and that climate finance is not reaching the most vulnerable, the producers, smallholder farmers. And then minister representatives from Sri Lanka and Palau provided sort of clear examples of the challenges that are faced on the ground, and really sort of brought home the idea of why we are here and the purpose of being together. So obviously being at a bank and the setting of the ADB really sort of helped us set the tone, which was on a really key issue, and that's about the challenges of financing mechanisms. And really the importance of and the opportunity to link research, innovation, knowledge, and evidence base to investment. We often talk about evidence-based policy. This is a term that is repeated in many, many venues. And it would be great if we started to hear a lot more about evidence-based investment. And I think there are a number of examples of this coming through and beginning, but I think that could take a lot more focus. So another example came through just in terms of the challenges of finance, various references to the subsidies, the 850 billion in subsidies that are largely incentivizing the wrong practices. So not enough is being done and not enough is reaching the right people. So building on the Bs, and I was really worried for a minute that you were going to take one of my Bs, so you didn't. We're okay, we can be friends still. My B and then 3 key messages is a bundle. So we talked a lot about bundles. It came out in a number of comments. The first one is a call for more uniform action, obviously on climate, resilience, and agriculture, focus in areas that are clearly delivering economic development related to livelihoods and poverty, and the urgency of 2030. We used to talk about 2030 and it was sort of like far away, it was not so urgent. It's right upon us. The decisions that are made now in these rooms, in this community, will actually make or break our ability to meet and the Sustainable Development Goals. The second one are the challenges, and they need to be quickly overcome. That's siloed partnerships. I think there was a really good example, actually just this morning on the IFI forum. Imagine the power of those financing institutions to come together around a clearly defined, aligned agenda. Obviously action follows money, and the power of investment of that community can I think, really make significant changes in the direction and trajectory of things. Fragmented programs and institutions, there is a proliferation of initiatives. Obviously, there's been a very clear interest and importance in agriculture and food systems. We see that coming up more and more. That's great because it's bringing people together, but it's also creating competition and fragmentation that we need to resist. So I think for us, it's about resisting that fragmentation and then bringing global alignment on investment and action. The third part of that bundle is really related to the question that you posed about the partnership that we just signed, the cooperation agreement between sg-afnr and the ADB, and that's the immense opportunity that exists in bringing research and innovation in support of investment and investment decisions. So, I think that area that combines obviously partnerships and partnerships for impact, but that power of research and innovation in terms of leveraging impact can be multiplied through a partnership that links an innovation pipeline with an investment pipeline. And I think bringing those two together through this cooperation agreement is really going to be able to have amazing results. So one of the risks of this panel is that we get replaced by AI. We're a summary panel, right? I mean, we're a fleeting group of people. So in order to combat that, I thought I'd try to bring a human dimension to my summary, and I did a snap survey. Some of you were asked a question, give me one word. So this is to resist, an inevitability of AI replacing us. But I wanted to share from this group some of the words that I heard when I asked, what is your takeaway in one word? First of all, it was a real challenge. Finding one word to describe these last 2 days. People said phrases, and I was like, nah, I don't take a phrase, I want a word. So we challenged the group. The first one was actually quite lovely. It was humility. And I think, taking some time to really understand challenges and understand our role was humility. Obvious ones like collaboration, partnerships. This was a double-barreled word, so I allowed it. Strong coordination, connections. So I think human connections, resilience, innovation, and institutions. And I think it's good, I'll close on institutions, because the power of institutions often outlasts political grounds, political policies. So I think the importance of institutions in our environment for a long purpose goal is critically important. And with that, I'll thank again the organizers. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Again, a very comprehensive takeaway and reflections. Particularly, grateful for your another B. Bonding is so important. Now we need to turn to Chani. Professor Chani, again, you are quite inspiring. When we have the FI Forum in Stanford, you have the foresight, projections for the 2050. And now today, you have the 5 minutes. Take away. I know you have the few slides. Probably very quickly to reflect your slide, and then we can go a second one. Chani, thank you.
There was one graph I wanted to show, and then things. I saw some others. But I really want to start by applauding the ADB for diving into food security so hard and taking a leadership role in this. That it's Echo Paul and others on this group. And then also I want to thank them for reaching out to us and letting us, IFPRI, be a partner in CGIAR in this. And they came to ADB in the fall of 2022, and we've been working and challenging each other ever since. And last night, Jingfeng challenged me. He said, well, you can't just talk about, the things you observe. You have to tell us a little bit, what can ADB's role be? So I'm going to try to do that. And I'm going to focus in, can we go to the next one? On 3 things, resilience, then nutrition, and then I love the phrase, somebody said it was measure, measure, measure. So measure, 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 but it's going to be implicit in the other 2. Let's go to the next one, and this is the graph that I wanted. So I was listening to Igor Linkov, and he's a real expert in resilience, and just sort of illustrated the story that I had and experience, which was, so I went home on March 13th, 2020, a day you might remember. Didn't go back to the office for many, many months after that. And a few days afterwards, I got a call from the National Treasury of South Africa, and they said, we're shutting down our economy. What's going to happen? And so we said, okay, we pulled together a team, and we dropped everything, and we worked for about 2.5 weeks on what's going to happen to the South African economy. And this was a pretty big group, and actually we came up with something quite different, that really, at its peak, we told them, the flow of goods going in through the economy, when, it's a flow concept, GDP, will go down by about 30%. Which was way more than what anybody had said at the time. And it had huge implications for food security, because it's a collapse in income that's going to drive the food insecurity. And so we were able to tell that. And they acted on that. And in fact, a lot of data came back in May that in fact they were down really right around 30% in May of 2020. And that helped a lot for a lot of things. So if you take this graph, we were pretty good. At the beginning part, we had stuff ready in terms of the analytics, in terms of we understood a little bit the shock. And then, of course, the Treasury asked us, well, how long is it going to take us to recover? When are we going to get this 30% back? And our team completely united on this, fractured entirely. Nobody had an idea of how quickly we're going to recover. And Igor said that that's absolutely typical. We just don't focus on recovery enough. It's a really big challenge, and it's a huge part of resilience in the system. So there's a research issue here in terms of understanding resilience, which is a topic that we talked about a lot, measuring it, but also the recovery part. And one of the points I think that is important is when we're designing systems and looking at systems, we know they're going to be shocked. We know that now. So we can try to reduce the vulnerability, but we also have to think about recovery and designing for rapid recovery. And that's a new thing, but that's a challenge, I think something ADB and others in this room could think about. The second point relates to nutrition, and if we just go on again. So this is a bit what, except for Indonesia, this is what Ismahan showed. And this is basically the population living in extreme poverty in Indonesia. And it's actually a slightly happier story than the world, but it's not so different from the world. But basically, it went from this core problem a generation ago that people just weren't able to afford enough calories. That was a big, big problem. 40%, 50%, 35% of the population just having real difficulty buying calories. And now it's down to 4 or 5%. But there's just a lot of persistence in that policy system, in the system there, and the way that we invest to deliver cheap, affordable calories. And I think this kind of relates to what Joe's talking about. This nutrition is really a problem, and it's part of it is just persistence from. So let's go to the next one, which is, so we have this extreme poverty, difficulty affording calories, fewer than 5%, but the stunting rate for children under 5, more than 20%. The overweight prevalence is more than 33%, and I would bet it's rising. I didn't have time to check, but I would bet, like everywhere else in the world, it's going up. So it's a whole different set of problems. And in a way, not in every way, but in a way, our drive to deliver affordable calories is perverse for some of these things, right? So there's a big shift here in that. But let's go on to the next one. This is from Susenas. This is what poor people eat. Almost 75% staples. Discretionary foods is a polite way to say Coke and potato chips. And then, little tiny things in fruits and vegetables. Look at fruits and vegetables. You can barely see the slice, right? Green is bad. That means you're not meeting your nutritional needs. So go to the next one. This is what we think, and this is very preliminary, kind of what a healthy diet for poor people would look like in terms of shares. And it's hard to overstate the change here. It's quite a lot of difference, right? You can do something with fortification, as was mentioned earlier today. I think that's important. But there's a really big change. And let's skip forward a few slides to the end, really. We can drop those. More expensive, that's a key one. Move to the next one. So 3 points. More thinking on recovery. When we're designing projects, when we're thinking about things, we keep saying it's going to get shocked. Well, if it's going to get shocked, then, how's it going to come back, right? And so let's think about that. Then nutrition, I think it's profound. And in a way, the World Bank shifted in 1990 from GDP to poverty. There was the World Development Report 1990. We need almost a similar shift in ways of difference that allow us to really address this profound nutrition challenge. And an entry point for the ADB is to invest to make these nutritious diets more affordable. That's one. I hope I've added one thing. And then I think the measure is also an important entry point for all of us and in ADB, in resilience, in nutrition, and in many other dimensions. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Cheney. again, it's very thoughtful, particularly for the resilience and also nutrition. So these are two areas we need to continue work on. Next few days with a number of the sessions focus on this. Again, we still have the 5 minutes before we move to the last session. In the audience, if you, okay, where you focus on letter recommendations, we have the 3B, 5W, and the 1H already. If you can help add another one, that would be great.
Yes.
Very brief, introduce yourself, and then we can take another
I'm
question.
Shivatana from the Department of Agriculture, Thailand. And I like what Kaltiro, the professor, mentioned about what was not mentioned in the two panels. And I agree that agro-processing is not mentioned. But anyway, I believe that we are talking about the whole supply value chain. One point that is not mentioned and very important is we didn't talk much about nature. And the last speaker mentioned something about shocks. And so we didn't mention about preparedness. So how about food reserves during shocks, during disasters? In ASEAN, we have these ASEAN +3 emergency rice reserves. And so I think, it is, I think, a high time, as what mentioned by Esther, the urgency is that we also think about food reserves, food preparedness, during disasters, and we know it is coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We can take another two. Introduce yourself and briefly provide your comments.
My name is Vincent Mendoza from Farm Vocacy, a tech startup founder. Yesterday, we were discussing about the discrepancy between the allocation of research and development budget from the public against the private sector. So my question is, when it comes to innovation, this also includes innovation in business model. How much percentage do international funding institutions allocate for research and development for innovative business models? Thank you.
Thank you. One last. I think we can come to two, but quickly.
Okay. I'm Kasuri Mukhopadhyay. I'm an independent consultant. A very resourceful discussion, as always. I want to highlight one thing which we are not talking about much, is that there is a limit to adaptation. So as we do adaptations, mitigation is also very, very important area we need to focus on. That's all.
Thank you so much. You have the last one.
Thank you. Alisher Shukurov, Deputy Minister of Agriculture from Uzbekistan. So we understood from yesterday and from today, the smallholders are least funded community now in the globally. And in Uzbekistan, last 5 years, we borrowed something around $3 billion from different IFIs to support the sector. I managed these resources, I assessed it, I saw the minimum amount we allocated for the farmers was the $100,000. Do you think that 100,000 is affordable by the smallholders? And it means that I don't think that the statistics 20% and 30% is true. That last 20 years, we're using only banking sector to support the sector. Why do we don't want to change the modalities? Are there any practical examples from the countries or from the institutions that to support the smallholders directly? So what is the reason why these things are continuing? And it seems to me that we need to change it now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Probably from the panel, reflected the questions from the floor. Each of you have their 20 or 30 seconds. But probably we'll start from the last question. About the direct work with the farmer. Probably, Joe, you start from there, 30 seconds, and then each of our panel have the chance also to address what you say, reflect, answer the questions. Probably you don't have an answer, but for the way forward, how we're going to incorporate in the discussions from the IFA first. Yeah. 30 seconds.
Wow, 30 seconds. Wow. Okay, so smallholders and banking systems, actually, that's a great question. I should say, Paul, mentioned the amount of climate finance that goes to smallholders. It used to be 2%. It's actually down to 1% now, less than, so 0.8%. So smallholders are very much an integral part of the population that we are serving, actually the population that we serve. And with public development banks as well as with non-sovereign operations, where we come in as equity investors as well as debt investors in local financial institutions as well as local banks to then ensure that the on-lending goes on to smallholders. But the big question that you might ask, and you'd be right, is are we truly getting to the vulnerable smallholders? Are we essentially just getting to the ones that are quite prosperous already? Because of course you have collateral requirements when you're on-lending. And the answer to that question that you haven't asked me yet is yes, we do. And so the requirement with our on-lending to local financial, to local banks, even as we come in as equity investors, even as we come in as debt investors, is saying that the condition on that on-lending, as we help banks get to their capital adequacy ratio, is to say that when they on-lend, they have to do it for those that are landless, women-headed households, and the vulnerable, marginalized populations in the target areas that we are reaching. So that's really critical in terms of what we are doing. And we also spend actually quite a bit of money and resources ensuring that we target well, right? So we use GIS, we use proxy means tests, and we essentially ensure that the populations that we are reaching are actually living below the poverty line and or are at risk of falling below the poverty line. So I also led the new targeting policy for IFAD that just closed this year, and we made sure that that was part of our target group. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, you use 1 minute. That is fine. Yeah, very sorry for. So anyway, we heard the comments, particularly for the research and the development, and also the comments from the online question also related to the research and development as well. So from this line, we have so many professors come, and also CG also part of the research. So 30 seconds, Professor.
Farm size issue is a very complicated one. Small farms are efficient and viable when development stage is low. It is well known that in India, there was clear inverse relationship between farm size and productivity. And small farms use a lot of labor, but labor is cheap in low income stage. But as economy develops, the wage rate goes up and labor cost goes up, and then positive relationship emerges between small and large. So if economy is at a low income stage, it's a good idea to support small farms. But if economy has become middle income stage, then forget about the small ones.
Thank you.
The Thai question. So Erie spent a lot of money to develop varieties resistant to drought and flood in the 1980s, 1990s, first decade of this century. All failed.
Okay.
Wasted lots of money. But now Erie has been successful.
Okay.
And combining with the idea of Michael Kramer's accurate weather forecast and the new varieties,
okay,
I think we can overcome the impacts of climate to some extent.
Yeah, I think Andrew can defend. You represent Erie. You are from the CG.
Yeah, as a CGIR, I do want to pick up on just the farm advocacy question. I think that that question about the research, innovation, investment, whether it's private sector, public sector, like the CGIAR, I think it's more about that research and innovation ecosystem and less about dividing the pie, but more about how do we work together to grow the pie on investments, because we know there's such a strong evidence base on the power of research and innovation. So I think that's rather than seeing where we can adjust percentages, we should be growing the entirety of the pie. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Chenny, your next one.
There we go. So I'm just going to address quickly finance to smallholders. And Yo was saying this. The biggest flow is from consumers paying, and eventually it goes back to producers. That's where the big money is, and really making sure that that works for smallholders, and especially as we're transitioning to higher quality foods, better diets. There's a lot of opportunities there in the value chain. We just have to think about that huge source of finance and money that's moving to smallholders directly. Thanks.
Paul?
Yeah. The question on the focus on adaptation versus mitigation, one is I don't think we should expect smallholders to be mitigating, given the responsibility around the world of climate change goes to countries like mine from the United States. That being said, I do think there's a lot of innovations out there that have co-benefits, that you can reduce emissions while simultaneously improving the livelihoods of small-scale producers. And so we should be focusing on those. And that's what we're trying to do in the Innovation Commission, identify co-benefits and then promote those kinds, because then they address the issue that you're talking about.
Thank you. Yeah, you represent small farmers now, so you have the concluding remarks.
Yes, sorry to eat up some of your lunchtime, but basically thank you, Margaret, for telling about food reserves and food reserves. That's very important, as well as community-based seed systems that women farmers are usually doing. For research, what we want are co-design, co-creation, co-innovation processes. Not about sharing the pie, but I'm understanding what each partner, especially farmers, organizations can bring and value that kind of role and contribution in the participatory action research. For adaptation, yes, to Paul, there are many adaptation practices and systems that also mitigate or help mitigate climate change. So that's why for many of us in the farmers groups, we really call for the investments in agroecology and regenerative agriculture. And lastly, just to have an example of what direct financing to farmers organizations can do. IFAD, during the COVID-19, gave us 1.8 million so that we could help in the resiliency of farmers. And this 1.8 million, just very small, we use it for 8 countries through what we call revolving fund. Revolving fund, give it to the needed farmers group, they will return the money that they were given so that the others can use it. And we are very happy to say that, how many? 20,264 beneficiaries were benefited, 50% women, and we had 100% repayment and utilization rate for farmers organization. So this kind of direct financing to farmers organizations, where we as farmers organizations can co-design, be prepared, be the proponent, of course with other development partners, so that it will be really relevant and appropriate to our needs and our realities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With this concluding remark, I want to invite one of the audience's big thanks to one of the panelists here for the wonderful takeaway, reflections. Again, we still have the 40 session, deep dive sessions next 2 days. So one of your comments going to be incorporated in the next two days sessions. With that, let's wrap up this session. I know you want to take a photo for the panelists, and then we move to the next one, right? Okay. We probably. So we just wrap up this session. We take a quick photo.
Yes.
And then we move.
MDG, can we invite you for the photo? And then we can proceed. Thank you.